Very good evening, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy. This is Success Sampath interacting with you, ladies and gentlemen. Do you want to become IAS, IPS, IFS, IRS? Be Unacademy with top educators of India and meticulously designed quality content. We are waiting for you, waiting to shape you especially so that you realize your dream. Once you enroll yourself in Unacademy, ladies and gentlemen, you undergo a great learning experience. You know very well about Unacademy, ladies and gentlemen, India's largest and the best online education platform. What are all the benefits you are likely to get once you enroll yourself? You can ask me that question. Yes, you got daily live classes. You can chat with your educator. You can engage in all-round discussions, especially productive discussions. And you can also ask all your genuine doubts and also participate in the answer polls. All these things you can do while the session's going on. You got structured courses here, especially. This is completely based on UPSC examination patterns and syllabus so that you never get deviated from the expected framework. It's not knowing this stuff, knowing to deliver this stuff because delivery matters. For that, we have got a mechanism to evaluate your performance, the preparation especially at various stages by conducting regular mock tests and quiz programs, and you also get detailed analysis or say report based on your performance. You will come to know where you are strong, where you are weak, and also the time you have consumed in solving a question. Once you enroll yourself in Unacademy, ladies and gentlemen, you got unlimited access to live and recorded videos. You can learn from anywhere, anytime. Why? Whatever may be the devices, electronic devices, whether it is mobile phone or laptop, even the desktop, you can utilize. So, to avail all these benefits, ladies and gentlemen, for that, what you have to do, please download an Academy learning app immediately, whether it is Android or iOS. Once you download, you will be accessing all these benefits. Who is this interacting with you? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Success Sampath from Chennai. I've got unique experience of got exposed to the field of engineering, management, and legal education with 25 years of experience in the field of coaching, especially shaping aspirants for civil service examinations. With my team, I could witness the results of 250 results, especially as IAS, IPS, IFS, IRS. All my kids are working in different parts of India and abroad as well. You can ask me what's your vision. Yes, I've got the vision of providing career solution to India, especially by enabling Indian youths. And fortunately, this particular vision of mine is coinciding with alignment with Unacademy's vision. We are working together so that you realize your dream. And you can also reach me through Telegram channel, even in the YouTube. Of course, as you watch now, right, that a lot of videos already available there. You can use my ID, say Success Sampath, or even that Sampath Tiruvengidam. And you can also that watch a lot of videos available already there in the Unacademy platform. The special class sessions you can also watch from there, and especially that a lot of MCQs solved there. Aiming towards forthcoming prelims. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not only me. We as that more than top educators of India, and that waiting to shape you. As I told you, as a team we are working together so that you realize your dream. Under UPSC Civil Service Examination, ladies and gentlemen, you got more than 15,000 courses, subject specific module, duration specific module. Under UPSC Civil Service Examination, we have devised two major programs. One is that plus, another one is iconic program. What is this plus? Here you got live classes, test series, unlimited practices, structured schedule. You can choose whether that 12 months program or 24 months program according to your convenience. You please use my referral code, say success, to avail maximum 10% discount. Not only that, we strongly recommend the very iconic program more than this plus program. Why? Because it has got unique feature. You will be allotted a personal mentor for you, and he or she will understand your nature. Accordingly, you will be suggested the study planner, and you will be getting personalized feedback based on that. And you will also be trained in terms of answer writing practices of the mains especially. Here too you can choose that either 12 months program or 24 months program for your favor. Please use my referral code, say success, once again, to avail 10% discount. Technically speaking, you end up paying mere 80 to 100 rupees per day basis actually. So that money you can that spend, you won't be even that spending more than that, in my opinion, for your evening snacks. The evening snacks, with that you ensure your career here, ladies and gentlemen, technically speaking. But you don't have per day basis payment, but if you work out that way, ladies and gentlemen, the very purpose of our interaction today, why we are interacting, if you ask me, yes, the very purpose of our interaction, ladies and gentlemen, to discuss the very the functioning of BRICS, especially in what way India engages the very BRICS. First of all, are you aware that BRICS, what is BRICS? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But in the beginning, it wasn't BRICS in plural, it was called BRIC. Because of the Brazil, Russia, India, and China alone we are talking about. What is this? The very economists, especially part of the Goldman Sachs, that we are talking about, the wealth management company, where that economist's name, especially Jim O'Neill, it is he who predicted when these nations, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, when all these nations coming together, by 2050 they can become superpowers in the world. Given its that resources, especially because there we are talking about the emerging market economies, otherwise they are called. So that is a prediction on the part of that gentleman, of course, but it became realistic also. So the very entity came into that existence. Also later addition, that the very South Africa also joined the course, and that out of that Fortaleza declaration you would have heard, especially the very sixth summit especially, the responsible for the emergence of the establishment of new development bank. You talk about part of this BRICS, and even one Indian honoring that particular position, none other than Mr. KV Kamath, that who was already heading ICICI Bank, you might be aware. What is this trend actually? Why this BRICS? If you ask me, forget about that, that gentleman's prediction that came into realistic. Why? Because there is a trend. People are tired of tired of all those international institutions and their bias, especially. And some of the institutions that came in response to the global the World War II, and since that that time period, even today they've got that grouping. And when you talk about United Nations organization, that would be appropriate. That even our Prime Minister Modi ji, when he was addressing yesterday, of course that he put forward this idea. So it should that be relevant. It should be restructured in such a way so as to accommodate countries like the G4. You talk about the Brazil there also, and even Germany and Japan and India, so that it serves. Because in all these the economic potentials, if they are not properly recognized, how come you can say that you are global entity? No, not at all. And also it's a discriminatory. It gets polarized. It's not only here in the international organization, say UNO, and we are talking about restructuring and expanding Security Council. Even the World Trade Organization, same is the case. All developed countries are that speaking only for their own favor, that that ultimately goes against the developing and underdeveloped world. So otherwise, all these developed countries utilizing all these international institutions, whether of course you call the twins of Bretton Woods Conference, whether it is IMF, even World Bank, even the World Trade Organization, all these institutions are dancing to the tunes of this the donors, the developed countries. So people especially the countries from Asia, the Eastern Oriental countries, they are tired of all these discriminatory practices. So they thought of having that their own mechanism. That's why the very birth of, you're talking about Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Even that India availed so for more than 9,000 crores loan, twice the loans. And the Asian Development Bank, of course, that's under the domination of the very United States of America and Japan. And whereas that the New Development Bank, part of this BRICS we are talking about, that line. You have to understand, it is the shift in the global financial order, global economic order. from Western focused financial institutions to Eastern focused financial institutions. Of course, directly it's not replacing, but of course, the supplementary effects to some extent, that we preserve our interests here among ourselves, not under the dictates of that those the developed nations. That's the trend we are talking about. So the prediction that came realistic, and that to the new development bank outcome of that Fortaleza declaration of Brazil, the sixth summit especially, even the recently that eighth summit that we conducted, the Goa, we talk about Goa declaration. And also this year, of course, very well, the very BRICS, the summit, that about to happen in, that Russia got, postponed because of the COVID situation we are talking about. So the very purpose of the BRICS, very well, now you understand, that to be alternative to the Western focused financial institutions. Otherwise, we are not ready to tolerate the discriminatory practices of all those global institutions. We want, rule based order, the sense, that the very rules and regulations, that we become signatories, that otherwise in terms of the consensus, what we reach, that we have to live letter and spirit. We have to strictly adhere to, abide by. We should be committed. And beyond that, so the very presence you talk about, the notion behind this BRICS, if you ask me, the emerging market economies, because in economy, you might understand, you have to complete the economic cycle. All produced items, that should be consumed. The largest producers, of course, that whether you call, that the very China, the very, that the Brazil, even India, and largest consumers also, where we talk about, that even, that India, the consumption, of course, Brazil. So when all the produced items are, that properly consumed, definitely, that you complete the economic cycle in that note. So the production and consumption, of course, meeting the stand you are talking about. So all these nations, of course, combining together, but even by 2038, even before that, we will take over US economy. And given the fact, in terms of purchasing power parity, we are already third position. So not only that, a lot of, that all these nations, of course, BRIC nations, you have to understand. The very purpose we thought, but as expected, it's not happening. It is definitely defeating the very purpose of this creation of this entity. And given the fact, that very recently, that it's not accusing China, the special drawing rights on the part of, that international organization, of course, IMF, India stopped that. That went against China. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about. So that's going against the spirit. It's not speaking against India. You have to understand, it's not only India. All these nations, given the COVID situation, what happened? All these BRIC countries should have come together and utilize, that especially India, Russia, that the Brazil, we are talking about, we are very strong in terms of manufacturing of vaccinations, of course, the vaccines. But what happened? All these BRIC nations, they were very happy to support their own bilateral relationship than this conglomeration. Their interest in such a way. And not only that, that the China, instead of utilizing this COVID situation to support, its own, the counterparts, it's going other way around. For example, the European Union, that as, it's beyond this BRICS I'm talking about. Already it's, the destabilizing, otherwise causing trouble in the European Union. Even in the Brazil, very recently, the very education minister, hinted that, the spread of information by China in such a way so as to dominate. Already, the world suspecting China. And beyond that, that there is no other go. Maybe, that in the international fora, that Russia keep on, that supporting, but it has got its own difference with China, well. And there is also saying, that love on water, fear on land. You would have heard about. Because the China's, potential rise is always threat, not only to the global countries, even the neighborhood, of course, its own comrade brother, the Russia. Because the very population explosion and also the pushing towards northward, probably, that the very Russia feels threatened by China. But whereas, they're very happy to conduct, that all those joint, naval exercise on water. That's totally different scenario. See, it is that way. So, and beyond that, that even among BRIC countries, they are not very happy about China. And to divert this attention, the internal problems, of course. And at the very COVID situation, the China was accused. And, that it did not extend its helping hand or proper information to the global community so that people would have got alerted, we could have averted casualties. Even the very, the World Health Organization, the way with which, it did not properly acknowledge, of course, that's why, we, along with, the United States of America spoke, that should be restructured. And not only that, the way with which the China, that dealing with other littoral states of the South China Sea. in the name of connectivity, making the nations debt trapped, and also, the creating aggressive posture in the border. All these things are, suspected. That's not, the very happy story. And also, even during the COVID situation, the very, that we are talking about, the very South Africa, the racism practice in China was complained. It has become very sensitive. So, what the very purpose for which it has been created, it's not solving the purpose. That's a question mark, ladies and gentlemen. They should have utilized, that they should use this, COVID situation, especially, work towards, health diplomacy. That's not happening. That is a cry. That is a context, that if at all we are going to elaborate further, given this situation. In spite of that, even during the creation, the very bricks, that was outrightly, because brick, the construction material, you got another meaning, bricks. People criticize. No, it's nothing. It is cement otherwise. What do you mean by cement? People say the countries of emerging market economies, with exclusively a new terminology. Let me say cement. When you say brick, they say cement. It's a criticism that came that time. You know very well cement, na? The countries of emerging market economies exclusively with new terminology called BRIC. That's what the criticism, because people said, and given, that, see the multi-continental, the connectivity, and given, that here the Russia and China, very well. Of course, China, the communist nation, right? Multiracial, multicultural, the multi-ideological, political ideology we are talking about, and the continental. So, multi-ambitions also, the China's, the ambition is always suspected. So, given that particular situation, how come all these nations can come together? So, that was the criticism during the inception of this BRIC. Later, it became BRICS. But that's also to some extent, that becoming realistic, to be, pessimistic in its tone. But of course, that maybe, and it's not only COVID situation, even prior to that situation, all these nations, especially, the Brazil, the Russia, India, they were facing, that strong economic crisis. For your kind information, gentlemen, this COVID crisis, worsening the scenario. So these are all the things we are talking about, that to introduce in what way, what is BRICS, and the composition and the agenda and the recent agreement, and in the context with which, in what way, that India can, otherwise, the concerns among the member countries, the way with which, that China bullying, apart from that, with the member countries, especially part of this BRICS. And also, the very ultimate purpose of the BRICS, getting, that derailed. All these things we are talking about, gentlemen. That is what the very purpose of our interaction today. Yes, very well, and there may be some of the newcomers also in this, that interaction. Very well, IR is all about, that international relationship. Nations or nation governments interacting at the global level or regional level, bilateral level. Otherwise, any foreign leader visiting India, Indian leader visiting foreign nation, if you speak from Indian angle, what are all the agreements you inked? Of course, that's not this and that, multifaceted, that interaction, the transaction you talk about, whether it is restructuring of, that international institutions, or even, that energy related to address energy security, maybe in terms of nuclear or renewable energy resources, solar or import of oil, and even exploring the shale gas we are talking about, that importing that, the geopolitical shift in terms of the resources we are talking about. And maybe commercial, the trade, export, import, otherwise, a part of becoming free trade agreement, or, part of becoming, that the common market, or, customs union, or, giving, that most favored nation status, so that facilitates. And also, the technological cooperation, we are talking about technology transfer, cultural cooperation. And even the, the BRICS summit, we are talking about the 8th summit that held in Goa, we were talking about, track to diplomacy. 5 points we are going to discuss anyway. So the backdoor policy we are talking about, non-governmental, otherwise the private entity, that using the private entity, to engage in discussions, it's to some extent informal mechanism. In what way? It is that way, that it is, and beyond that environmental standards we are talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way. So this, and also the engaging, the diaspora, the Indian diaspora in different parts of the world, because, the contributors, they are the very, remittances coming to India, especially from the Middle East region alone, that we used to get around $40 billion. And given the fact where India, aspiring to become, global player, gone are the days of, defense mechanism on the part of foreign policy. We are not, still under the clutches of, that non-alignment or even the strategic autonomy. We started playing, that global proactive role, especially as Prime Minister Modi ji, that keep on emphasizing. You just observe what's happening at the global fora, infuse, that energy, then, that discharge the role play, of course, as global leader, Vishwa Guru. When this is a scenario, that how do we engage? Otherwise, that there comes ultimately neighborhood first policy. So the act, that look waste policy, act is policy. We are talking about even our own, that the past experiences in terms of whether it is, that the Panchsheel policy, non-alignment. Even you talk about Gujarat doctrines. Everything, we move to the next level. It's highly realistic that, given various parameters, we are moving ahead. India, a force to reckon with. That is why they expanded, of course, the non-permanent membership we are going to, that adhere next year, and also, that we are talking about the so-called, World Health Organization is going to be headed by India. A force, that to reckon with. India, 1/6 of the humanity, and we were heading towards double-digit GDP, up to 2008. You are aware, and beyond that, the demand. We are talking about the big market in India and demographic dividend. Definitely, we got, that a great role, that to play, especially to create the multipolar world, the international, that state system where each and every nation will have say. And as global player with other global players engaging European Union, definitely we can, that we be more relevant in the global geopolitics, especially. That's what. And even the how, the rising China, that, and given that fact, that is what it is right time to recall once again. Dr. The Jai Shankar, that Union External Affairs Minister. It is not, we are rejecting, of course, that non-alignment movement doesn't mean that we are aligning with anybody. It is issue based, that the case specific, that approach we engage without compromising domestic interests. As that also, it is right time to recall once again, that former, that security advisor, Dr. Shivasankara Menon, especially he emphasized in terms of military, it may be, that unilateral world, maybe Uncle Sam, United States of America. But when it comes to economic sense, it is multipolar world. But politically, we are confused. Given all this, backdrop, how India, the various policies and programs of, that various nations, how it is going to affect, India's domestic interests. Because, well, the 19th century meant for, we are keep on emphasizing all these, global political order shift also. 19th century meant for Europe, 20th century meant for, very well, of course, United States of America, 21st century for, that, especially Asia, how we are going to catch up with China, the very, the shift in global political order. The 22nd century, of course, for, Africa in one theory, of course, people say Eurasia, especially, that Central Asia and the untapped potentials. Otherwise, are we falling in the line of, that America, under the pressure of America, that are we giving up, that are we not properly engaging? Do you think our, that the foreign policy is lacking, strategic depth? These are all the questions ultimately. Given that situation, the COVID crisis, already, that all these nations, that the strain on economy, and COVID crisis, it's a global economy, even global, that economic output, it's quite pessimistic. What we are going to, so that demands, that forgetting all these differences, we have to come together. So the very purpose for which, the BRICS, that got, that instituted should come up, that is the purpose. So these are all the things, we are trying to link, of course, so everything part of international relations we are talking about. So how it is related to, that UPSC Civil Services Examination, we are going to give, basic information about BRICS. Once again, the elaborated, context we are going to establish. And how the China, they engaging with all BRIC countries, the experience. Otherwise, given COVID situation, how the BRIC nations, that underwent the impact, in what way we can, the tide out the crisis. And of course, this, that this year's, that the BRIC summit in Russia also got postponed because of the situation. In spite of thing, we were expecting, that to present very well in the very agenda, to be, that to be more relevant, to contribute more. But let's see. So, and what are all the resources to be consulted? Anyway, this is the content of our interaction, the very purpose of interaction, India and BRICS especially. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move. I think you got the idea, what is IR. The relevance, of course, you got, syllabus this way. In prelims, you got straight, that direct questions, simple questions, factual based questions, 10 to maximum 15 questions you get. Of course, that here the current events of international importance, that the very spirit what we spoke, it is in one-liner. But whereas in main examination, you got, of course, the 50 marks contribution from this portion. where you got two 10 marks questions and two 15 marks questions. Here you are going to write something descriptive in character and also analytical in orientation that demands your depth, wisdom. Otherwise, let me put this way: the prelims is all about your testing your awareness. Mains written especially is all about testing your in-depth understanding. But whereas interview very well, where do you stand? It's about your decision-making process. Awareness, that wisdom, the decision. This is the way that you have to understand. Of course, this what the spirit I shared, you get formalization, the documentation in terms of syllabus. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are relevant. Of course, that India and that the very BRICS. You can talk about that where you talk about global groupings, India and global groupings, agreements involved. Of course, we spoke Goa Declaration, Fortaleza Declaration. Whether it is affecting that involve when we involve of course when we involve ourselves, whether it is affecting India's interests, and also that this particular thing entity, it also overlaps this neighborhood portion, because the presence of the China. Important that international institution. Of course we can see from Asian perspective the very BRICS, and part of that there came New Development Bank and various policies, the policies and practices of that the China, even that the part of BRICS I am talking about, even the very Russia, in what way it is going to influence the very entity. Even the India took that stand. I said that the blocking special drawing rights, that went against China, part of IMF. Given situation, COVID situation, instead of that supporting that among BRIC countries, what happened, right? And that most of the nations that started looking towards Western focused financial institutions. Of course, IMF, out of 199 189 countries, that around 112 1 or 2 countries started getting help from the international financial institutions. The purpose gone. Even these BRIC member countries they started looking that way. So this is that the very purpose is relevant or resolved or not. So from this syllabus angle that we are going to assess, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is right time. Let's move. So this BRIC, of course, the beginning it is BRIC only. Later the addition of South Africa we are talking about. So as we discuss, the economists Goldman Sachs, the wealth management company, especially the Jim O'Neill, in his econometric analysis in the year 2001 spoke about this. The BRIC as largest, that economies coming together, and formation of this BRIC by 2050, they will become, that they will take over, they will dominate the scene as superpowers. And not only that, the very, that 2006 especially, the G8 outreach summit, where especially it happened in St. Petersburg, of course, that the formalization of the very entity called BRIC. The first BRIC summit, of course, happened in Russia only. Yekaterinburg we are talking. And that our focus is going to be more relevant, that what happened recently, just have idea. So the 2010, of course, that the decision, that to add South Africa, but culminated later, especially the third summit we are talking about, no more BRIC, now it has become BRICS, especially the Sanya, at the summit at Sanya in China. It is the third summit we are talking about. It is a platform to engage upon economic issues, the emerging market economies, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about. So the humble beginning, to focus on economic issues. Later they embraced variety of issues, especially in terms of that the trade part of economic issues, health, technology, agriculture. They started focusing. Even the very new developments focus is mainly that the thrust is on infrastructure. Later that our focus is also that on in terms of education, the health sector, even women related issues. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way that the part of $100 billion new development bank we are talking about, it is that way. So later that you diversify the very interests, it is that way. So the 2014, the very sixth summit, as we told you already, right, the very Fortaleza, the place in Brazil, the very declaration that culminated in the new development bank. It is a challenge to the Western focused financial institution, which has got its own headquarters in China, Shanghai. But India hosts, that this 2016, the 8th BRICS summit, held. Even we also invited Nepal to participate in this. Hope you are aware. So the BRICS, BIMSTEC, that apart from that, we are talking about, especially it happened in Goa. We say Goa declaration also parallelly. The very resolution, of course, that we passed. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way we are talking about, that if you want some basics and some more, it is a collective voice, especially of global south. because the member countries, you know very well, the Latin America, Brazil, of course, the exceptional here, the North Russia we are talking about, the India, China, the South Africa, of course. It's a global, you know, majority of the country, except Russia, you're talking about. It's a global voice. As we say, NAM as a moral voice. This is global voice of the South, ladies and gentlemen. It's not only that, it's a grouping of, you know, fast emerging economies, emerging market, you know, the marketing, you know, that we are talking about economies with huge market potential. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand, you know, it has got the share of 15% of global trade. But in terms of humanity, we are talking about 40% of humanity accommodating. The population, the global population is 40% here within this, you know, BRICS community. But the share of trade only 15%, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind information. But very meager population, you know, the European Union is capable of commanding, you know, that around 18% of, you know, global trade. That's different scenario, and we have to understand the challenges and all. Come back. So the first ever compact non-Western, you understand, it is not Western focused, non-Western and intercontinental. You just imagine Brazil, Latin America, Russia, of course, you talk about the Asian continent top, India, South Asia's, you know, that Indian subcontinent, India and China, but you see the African continent, the south portion. Different continents, you know, of course, you talk about involving Latin America, Asia, Africa. It is that way. So intercontinental, and also, you know, that favoring multilateral club. We are not for, you know, unipolar world or bipolar world. We are for multilateralism. The global international system should, you know, that give space for each and every nation. The greater entity, multipolarity, doesn't mean that, you know, individual nations should give up their sovereignty or compromise their domestic interests. So this is the way, as we speak in other entity, that is the core idea here. Not only that, the unique experiment, you know, that to bring together politically, economically, culturally diverse nations. You know, politically, because, you know, that here we have got, you know, democratic countries as well as communist nations. In terms of economy, you know, that the Chinese economy is totally different. Got the point? The Russian, even the size of the economies we are talking about, and economic policies, and culturally diverse nations, of course, in terms of language, the way of life, style of life you believe in, who share a range of concerns and interests with regard to functioning of the Western. But in spite of that, we all different entities, of course, unity and diversity, coming together to address, to speak about, to express concern about the Western liberal international order. When we combine together, we've got our own difference of opinion with the Western world and its, you know, discriminatory policies, exploitative measures, unfair dominance. But we want rule-based, you know, that organization, rule-based order in the world, driven by, especially the BRICS, driven by the idea to challenge, if not dismantle, the Western-focused financial institutions or Western hegemony called leadership, and bring, you know, that new ideas on the table for global governance. We are providing alternative ideas. It is not going to dismantle. Of course, you know that it's a force to reckon with. We have to understand, and given our resources size, you have to understand. It's you know that it's, you have to provide alternative suggestions for that. It's not simply accusing. What is the viability? It is that way we are talking about. It becomes opportunity. The very BRICS, you know, that with which we are doing. And in Goa declaration, of course, you know that we are talking about, you know, that the India's five-pronged approach, part of the BRICS we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. It is innovative upon new cooperative mechanisms like, you know, that track to diplomacy, the informal, you know, that interaction. The backdoor policy, as I said at the beginning, you know, that engaging with private institutions, non-governmental organizations, so that you understand the reality. Of course, you know, even Prime Minister Modi's administration, the very foreign policy, this particular aspect is characterized as retail diplomacy. So continue to, you know, that it's continuing the existing cooperative mechanisms we are talking about. We have already, you know, that come up with some mechanisms, you know, that this is what the, you know, even in the foreign policy, even in the economic sense we are talking about, continuity with change. We want to continue. It's not, you know, the radical, you know, shift we are talking about. And also, you know, the deepening the institution building. So, you know, that the part of, you know, that the BRICS, we were also aiming to bring, you know, the credit rating agency, a separate credit rating agency meant for this part of this new development bank. Of course, you know that the very BRICS, and deepening already existing institutions, and so in terms of its relevance, in terms of its outreach, and implementing, you know, the previous summit, you know, decisions. You know, that's a problem. It's very easy to speak. It's very easy to preach. It's very difficult to practice. That's what you know. The very difficulty on the part of implementation, given that the intercontinental, that intercultural, the interpolitical ideological differences between among the member nations of BRICS, and also integrating that cooperation mechanisms, that's what we are talking about. Given COVID situations, we were not on same page. All the member countries are they're traveling in different direction. That is the very the concern here, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about. It is that way. Not only that, the China's that hegemonic, that you have to understand why we are talking, why we have taken up this topic, the very BRICS. Of course, that on this context, apart from that, you will understand more the international context, why the China's hegemonic ambitions, leadership, imperialistic ambitions. So that has subverted this grouping. So that we have to answer the COVID, that we are not very sure about it. But in spite of that, there were internal troubles to divert the attention of the global community, of course, that we are talking about, that have subverted this grouping solidarity. So that this particular that aggressive posture of China has got its own impact on very solidarity of the global South. That's what we are talking about. Collective wise, the very BRICS, the shadow effect we are talking about, and also the China's recent actions, as we spoke, especially in the South China Sea. We want to contain the China in the South China Sea, the containment policy, and also encircling China in that that region we are talking about. The China has got its own the difference of opinion with littoral states of the South China Sea because of its that overlapping exclusive economic zones, and also that, as we spoke, artificial the creation of islands for its own security purpose. And that leads to incursions to that encroachment in the Indian territory we are talking about. Not only that, the South China Sea and encroaching Indian territory, the aggressive posture at the border along the McMahon line of actual control. This particular thing attests to the view that China is firmly attached to its Middle Kingdom hegemonic identity. They are not liberal. They don't understand. They are not ready to recognize the individual sovereignty of every nation. And also, that its care is very little when it comes to global South, ladies and gentlemen. Not only that, so the very Chinese, People's Liberation Army and its action, especially, that against Indian armed forces, that has created very bad image, that in BRICS. This action, that very well, it is contrary to the grouping's emphasis on equality of states in the international politics that went out. China is well known for that keep on violating it's almost like that earlier we talk about axis of evil nations. Even North Korea is well known for that rogue nation, even like Pakistan we are talking about. But China, of course, that's the point. Unreliability. Though we had Panchsheel policy, that it's a matter of disappointment, that for our the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, what happened? The invasion 1962. And recent, that, so on the one side, even the Prime Minister Modi's personal touch is not working with China, even with Pakistan. On the one side, they are hobnobbing here, on the other side, military intervention there in the north. So here also, that now to divert the international attention, the Chinese, that the reactions especially. So it's contrary to the groupings, the BRICS emphasis on equality of states that went against. It lost, that India because of its, that unreliability. It lacks consistency. Otherwise, they keep on violating the commitments, ladies and gentlemen. So it's facing international backlash and simmering domestic discontent due to its, the mishandling of the COVID pandemic. So this is what the point. So the whole, that even the very European, that the continent, that they are deadly against, the China. But of course, China has got its own role. The 16+1 format with which, it's trying to create pressure groups and spreading information that goes against the European Union and trying to establish hegemony there. And through its Belt Road initiative, it's trying to, that the dragon trying to enter everywhere, making the nations dead trapped and want to promote communism. Otherwise, the hegemonic agenda, as I said, the Middle Kingdom hegemonic identity. So this affects, the very COVID situation. The Chinese President Xi Jinping, that he seems to have made a tactical move of whipping up national sentiments in the country. That has become, that if If you think, that you can't win this election, that you have to go for war. That has become strategy from, that long ago, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about. Yes, it's not only that. Of course, to deflect the domestic and international pressure, the very China we are talking about, especially on Beijing, the Xi Jinping, that has opened up almost all possibilities, all possible contentious fronts, especially including South China Sea, and also, that our word, that the border standoff with India especially. So China, that keep on, that doing all these measures. It's not the first time, for your information, ladies and gentlemen. This belligerence, this unnecessary belligerence, especially the aggressiveness, what we are talking about, it is untimely given the COVID situation, which has affected, the outcomes of even the World Health Assembly, of course, we are talking about. World Health Organization did not acknowledge properly. Otherwise, you didn't provide, you did not alert the global community. Even that the Russia, India, the China summit also, that got affected because of that. The two key multilateral forums, that got affected because of that. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way. And going beyond that, the context is not over. The recent border clashes between India and Chinese soldiers, of course, it's already, that there is a gap, there is a suspicion, there is an unresolved dispute, that over line of actual control, and also the McMahon line, what we are talking about. Then and then the skirmish activities announcing Arunachal Pradesh part and parcel of China. It is that way they make, lower officials, diplomatic officials will making statement, and ultimately, the withdrawal of statement once, India protests. Beyond that, the recent, the border clashes, what we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, that has created a sharpened fault lines among the BRIC nations. That's very important, that because that goes against the very purpose of the BRICS. So for minor tactical gains on the ground, China strategically lost India. That is the point. For minor benefit, that you lost, that is an injustice. When there is injustice in the relationship, as per, that Martin Luther King, when there is injustice in the relationship will not be long lasting, ladies and gentlemen. Justice brings ultimately, trust or confidence. That leads to, that long-lasting relationship. It is that way. So the border standoff, what we are talking about, that would push Delhi closer to the West already. So we want to, that balance this rise of China, especially the Asia-Pacific region. We are inviting, the very United States of America, not only US, and we are also bringing parallel Australia, Japan, especially under the quadrilateral. So mainly, that Washington allies. These are all the signs we are talking about, which already emerging. Yeah, because we have to counter. And very United States of America also needed, that India, the strategic location to counter this, the China, because the US has got its own, that issues with, China, the trade war. Ladies and gentlemen, it is that way, they are always against democracy, that this China, the communist nation, because basically the democratic country, USA, otherwise their own way of, playing democratic card, otherwise bringing human rights violation, otherwise banning, that the so-called, 5G in the United States of America, when it was already implemented in the European Union, here in India also be allowed, in spite of the things, our understanding with USA, all those. So India recently aligned with, the US to oppose the expansion of the special drawing rights. It is not a currency, it's otherwise, called units, part of, IMF, that gives guarantee to the member countries. We recently, that opposed and aligned with, US for that purpose. It seems India has taken this particular position. See, the very purpose of BRICS, that you want to be alternative to Western focused financial institutions. But you did something in IMF that to counter, the very Chinese influence in IMF. So the very purpose gone. India, that should also be accused on this front. Because, it's not only India, all other nations, and even the Chinas, that you can accuse China like anything, you're going to see. So, but not only the Delhi's action goes against the BRICS demand. That is what, that we also attract this criticism, ladies and gentlemen, especially to reform the Bretton Woods institutions. It is reinforcing once again. And to oppose the, the domination by West. But now we are aligning. This is also, but of course, that's why we say the foreign policy is very high. It's not static. It is highly volatile. We've got our own issue-based support to other nations. You can't, that take India for granted forever. Because, we have to ensure our domestic interests, given the fact, the aggressive China and causing troubles to us. So that's why we went beyond this, that BRICS interest to counter, the very China we are talking about, especially in IMF, special drawing rights. Ladies and gentlemen, not only that, the very new development bank, what we are talking about, has also not lived up to the expectations. See, underperforming of the developing countries, because why? It has failed to extend any financial assistance to them. The $100 billion pledges we are talking about, of course, that very recently, that of course, the masala bonds, even in India also we are talking about. And apart from that, the so-called, assistance, financial assistance to China through that, that new development bank we are talking about. And more than 300, million, the dollar support we are talking about. But it's not happening for other, developing countries. So that's why we are talking about, then it has to grow, it has to expand. Contraction is death, expansion is the life. But to expand, you have to, that bring, all those nations on board by, their contribution. You have to make, the difference in their lives. So that's not happening in the part of New Development Bank, of course, that's accused. So the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, that swiftly moved during the COVID situation. What happened? They started helping the countries, especially to provide financial safety net to several countries in the world. That boosted, that the credentials. In spite of this accusation, the COVID situation, the crisis situation. So it is totally different scenario, but it is at the cost of New Development Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, forget about that. Even the facts speaking in such a way that that international monetary funds, that head, you are talking about Kristalina, that Georgieva, that is the name, of course, the head we are talking about. She said, that 102 countries out of 189 membership nations are seeking assistance from, it's, that at the combat, that the pandemic, of course, the COVID pandemic we are talking about. This is a statistics which is reinforcing once again the very role of the Bretton Woods Conference, IMF and World Bank. And given the failure on the part of New Development Bank to live up to the promises. So this is that way we are talking about, that the very highly volatile situation on the part of the international relationships. Not only that, China doesn't enjoy, of course, it is people, always suspect China, whether it is European Union, other, even the, the Western world, the 16+1 format we are talking about, even Russia suspects because of, the northward expansion of China. I told you already, the fear on land. But in the multilateral fora, it's coming and supporting China, but what to do? All these things happening. So everybody suspecting the skirmish activities China doing with Hong Kong in the South China Sea, what's happening? Even with Japan, it has got, that the Senkaku Islands, its own dispute. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of issues we are talking about. China doesn't enjoy the trust, suspicion. Even it is right time to recall the Napoleon statement. Here is a tiger which is sleeping, showing tiger, yellow color, Mongoloids race, the China. Here is a tiger which is sleeping. We don't know when it will wake up. When it wakes up, it will shake the world. Even today, that it continues. As we, that got victimized because of, the 1962 invasion. It's a betrayal of, the Panchsheel policy with India. So even today, so China, that doesn't enjoy the trust. Once you lose trust, it's over. So Russia doesn't seem to support China. That is, it's not doesn't, Russia does support. That's what we are keep on emphasizing. In spite of its own, that reservation against China, it's supporting in all the international forums. Because why? Strategic compulsions. It's not a conscious choice, ladies and gentlemen. It has to no other go. Given its neighborhood, given its, the culture, given its, the political ideology. So Russia has also been, of course, trying to safeguard its sphere of influence, especially in the post-Soviet space. Very well, the collapse of USSR became Russia. From, especially the China's vigorous push through Belt Road Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, for China, that Russia is also not, that free from accusation, very well. And when it was trying to annex, that the Crimea annexation, what happened, well, the part of Ukraine, the Sevastopol region. So that ultimately, that bullying the countries in the Eurasian borders. And beyond that, so Moscow's relations with, the US and European Union also, got deteriorated. Especially why? That's what we are talking about. The Crimean, crisis, of course, part of Ukraine, the Crimea annexation. That will leading to, that, so what happened in this particular situation when it's something not good happening for, that very Moscow or Russia, either with, that USA or European Union countries. So naturally, it has to look towards, that our dependence on China. So it is because of that it started supporting, the China in all international fora. It's by compulsion, strategic compulsion, not by conscious choice, ladies and gentlemen. It is that way. So given this situation and go beyond that, actually, that what are all the troubles, the caused by China in the BRIC nations. This is what our focus of attention at present. Right. So in Brazil too, as I told you right earlier, the social media backlash against China, the people started, spreading information. Why? Because its education minister, he himself, that of course, hinted a link between the COVID, that 19 pandemic and China's plan of world domination. Even the very European Union suspecting the China trying to, that utilize this situation, the COVID situation, to spread its, the tentacles, to strengthen its base, as I told you in terms of 16+1 format. Here too, the Brazil suspecting the China, and also as I told you, right, African people have suffered racial discrimination, that in China. That's very sensitive issue, and it's coinciding with that already the very United States of America. I told you, right, the racism, the George Floyd, of course, I can't breathe, which is going to have impact in the US elections. Though you're talking about, that the very South Africa, well, the racial apartheid, the political policy of, racial segregation, it's over. They struck, conciliatory note with the colonizer. That's what, thanks to African Gandhi, of course, Nelson Mandela. We're talking about, it's that way, but the very nation, that facing racial discrimination in China, it is very sensitive issue. See, with all member countries, that the irritation, the bullying, the problem, the concerns. So in India, the public opinion has turned against the China. Very well. That's why, that of course, that led to the boycott of, the China campaign. Otherwise, even the government itself, that banning, a lot of apps, very well. We are not ready to compromise our security interests. Otherwise, data theft by China, in spite of the Chinese investments in India. Even the IPL going on, the sponsorship we were talking, yes, it is that way, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about it would be difficult for the Indian government to conduct business as usual with the China anytime soon, because the recent irritants. Of course, in spite of that, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the silent meetings, India engaged the China to disengage in what are all the modalities, 5 modalities, that our Ministry of External Affairs, that Dr. Jaishankar working out, and also in future the G20 sideline meetings in the November, we are likely to take up the issue again. These are all the things, in spite of all these irritants we are talking about. Yes. So this COVID, that situation, how it impacted the BRICS, that we once again let us create, the context for it. So the COVID-19 pandemic, that might change the perception by knocking down, that exports and that inducing the slowdown in BRIC markets. Yeah, it's not only because of the COVID situation. Even prior to that, the global economy was slow, and that too, Indian economy, very well, the very struggle. And even among BRIC countries, if you speak it, that in total, they were facing a lot of problems. So that the very Brazil, Russia, India, very well, all 3 nations, they are top in terms of infected nations. Soon we will be crossing, officially 1 crore. We are talking about, of course, by the time it could have crossed also. Yes. So the BRIC economies were sluggish even before the pandemic, ladies and gentlemen. And the trend is likely to continue. That's what we are talking about. So economic basis to keep BRICS intact is likely to face severe strains, and also the COVID, the pandemic worsening the scenario. Right. We could have utilized this opportunity. This is otherwise called health diplomacy. We could have done at least among BRIC countries, but we missed the bus. All member nations can be accused in that way. Yes. So another area of health diplomacy, that where BRIC countries could have that cooperated, but they failed to do so. That is what accusation, ladies and gentlemen. So India and Russia and that the China, they have sent medical assistance, as I told you, to other countries based on their bilateral relations and interests, not to the member countries of BRICS, not among member countries of BRICS, not part of this conglomeration. So that shows, that how serious, that otherwise, that all the member nations taking it account, given the situation, right? Not only that. So that you talk about the BRICS, of course, the global South we are talking about. It's the voice of global South. except Russia, of course, you can, but instead of that, the majority nations, they hardly figure their priority list. They never give, it's not busy, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about priority in life. That's what we are talking about. You make relevance, right? So it is that way. So, all member countries of BRICS, never came the part of the priority list among all these nations. They were traveling in different directions. They had their own, that vested interests. With other nations in the world, they started engaging. Of course, the Brazil, that India and China have enormous manufacturing capabilities, ladies and gentlemen. Especially, that could have been utilized to ensure, that especially the poorer countries to get early access to the vaccine. No, when we are very to, that embrace, the different parts of the world, say UK, Australia, but we never did with, among ourselves, part of, BRICS. Why? Because, the suspicion, the trust deficit, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about among the, especially over the China, among the member countries. Yes. So it is Indian way of looking at, BRICS I'm talking about. Yes. So instead they have their own, that instead of, the coming, that instead of coming together all these entities, part of BRICS, they had their own, that separate, vaccine development program. Even we are working on it. We can't compromise the trial period, well. Yes, so Russia and China, that of course, that they are going, that so low, while Indian pharmaceutical companies, that collaborating with, that's what I spoke, the US, UK, Australia, South Korea, even Israel, we are talking about. So, that it's for developing and distribution, the very, the eagerness you show, that we India, otherwise, that we show to have, all these, countries on board. That's not happening among BRIC nations. Yes. So the BRICS collaboration, of course, that for COVID-19 vaccine, that could have been shot in the arm, that for grouping. But we missed the bus, we missed the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. This is what the main point we are talking about. Yes. It is that way, ladies and gentlemen. It is the right time, that not only that, rather than, that taking BRIC members along, working with them, right? So instead of taking all the member countries of BRICS on board, especially during the crisis situation, the COVID crisis, but China has taken unilateral path. It's trying to dominate the world, especially through Belt Road Initiative. Making the it's quite busy, that otherwise diverting the international, that opinion against, China, and parallelly, that on the one side, that South China Sea we are talking about, and having problem with littoral states, on the other side with India, and also, that unresolved dispute with Japan, well, and beyond that, 16+1 format on the part of European Union, and also engaging in trade war, of course, we are talking about with the United States of America, and threatening, affecting the peace of, Indian Ocean, that region, the zone of peace, and interfering in the strategic affairs of all these, countries surrounding Indian Ocean, especially the king of Indian Ocean is India, well. But where China, the China trying to test, trying to poke its nose. That's why, to balance that, we are talking about, of course, our alliance. Of course, we are inviting the very, USA or quadrilateral countries. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, and bringing Australia, Japan too. It is that way. So this situation, unilateral path, domination, we are talking about the China, even the testing, of course, in the very Brazil also, it's spreading information in such a way. The middle, that period, hegemonic, the hegemonic, that agenda especially. So it is thereby, subverting, solidarity among member nations of Global South, ladies and gentlemen. Definitely, this will have, that long-term implications. It is right time, that all the member nations among the, that the very BRICS realize this, and they have to come together instead of, behaving like Navagraha in different directions. The very purpose to challenge the Western-focused financial institution and to be alternative. So understanding this purpose, instead of, that, of course, that is what, when you talk about India, it has got its own, the domestic interest. As it blocked, it went against, that the China in IMF, and, the very China also doing a lot of measures, even, that South Africa suspecting, Russia suspecting, Brazil suspecting. So instead of, that going in different directions, it is right time to realize the potential and to make it, very realistic. The Jim O'Neill's prediction, as it became realistic as entity, as BRIC became BRICS, even the New Development Bank, came out of that BRICS. And also, that challenging the Western-focused financial institution along with Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, even Asian Development Bank. But how? The purpose we are talking about, have you reached, that's what the criticism we have seen in part of NDB, that new development bank, ladies and gentlemen. So it's not going beyond the, the BRIC nations, especially to support, other developing countries, as that IMF recently did. Out of 189 countries, one or two countries, the benefiting. Of course, it is reinforcing once again the Western focus, financial institutions. We have to understand, we should not, lose the purpose. It is right time we wake up, and even the missed, the health diplomacy, given the COVID situation. So we have to realize all these situations, that so that that we can avoid the long-term implications, that why, by including, and creating, the doubts over this particular situation. What happens, right? It creates some sort of doubts, especially over the effectiveness of the BRICS, and also, that the similar platforms like, Shanghai Cooperation, or that organization, or Russia, India, the China, that the very entity, the cooperation we are talking about, ladies and gentlemen. It is right time, let's be realistic, let's understand, so that, that to make, that the very BRICS more relevant. Otherwise, it will fall in the line of, that NAM. Let's wake up, let's realize, and let's, that the united we stand, divided we fall. And when India itself aspiring to be a Vishwa Guru, it is right time, that India should, that be prompt, that and soon it has to solve this border disputes and forging alliance once again, so that, BRICS will be moving to the next level, and also by incorporating some more countries, expanding, because expansion is life, contraction is death, ladies and gentlemen. So that it will be, that challenging, that letter and spirit in future, the Western focus financial institutions, or, that the Twins of Bretton Woods conference, what we are talking about. Not only that, the multilateral fora, we are talking about this global South voice will be heard there in the multilateral fora effectively. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I think, that this is the right time for us to discuss, of course, resources, well, the Hindu, Indian Express editorials, apart from that, Rajya Sabha TV debates we are talking about. Not only that, that you have the Press Information Bureau, you suggest other materials also. It will be appropriate. Have the habit of, that reading. Apart from that, for hobby purpose, the books like, the David Malone, and even Sashi Tharoor, Sri Raja Mohan, hobby. As a matter of hobby, you understand everything in a big picture. You will start understanding the connectivity, the geopolitics, the dynamism happening in the international state system. So it becomes very easy for you to relate, and also to speak on behalf of India, and preserve the domestic interests. Ladies and gentlemen, this is right time, that I think, that, and so far, that success, Sampath, that I have interacted with you. Hope it would have, benefited you. And so that, you start, looking at this particular perspective in future also. In the future, of course, the postponed summit of, that the Russia-centric summit of this BRICS, probably, that when we have that summit, all these, factors will be taken into account. Yes, please use my referral code SUCCESS to avail 10% discount, especially to join Iconic program, ladies and gentlemen, right? So thank you so much for your passions, and, that wishing you all the very best and best of luck. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Unacademy once again. This is Success Sampath Hidroto interacted with you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Good night. Yes.